speaker today is Marc Perkel, and I'll just go through the information on the white sheet. So if you don't have good hearing, you can just read it yourself at your leisure. Marc Perkel is the founder of the Church of Reality. He explains why reality needs a religion and why atheism isn't good enough. In a perfect world, atheism becomes totally meaningless. No one cares what you don't believe in. They care about what you do believe in. And what should you believe in? Reality. Atheism needs reality because without reality, there would be no place for God not to be real in. Realism is the science of understanding who we are, what our purpose is, and how we can live our lives in right relationship to reality so that reality doesn't excommunicate existence. I'm probably you from existence. At any rate, you can figure that one out at your leisure. So, atheists, it's time to put down your Bibles, quit talking about God, and start focusing on what is real rather than what isn't real. If you know everything about nothing, then you know nothing about everything. And the man who wrote that and will speak on it is Marc Perkel. Please come forward, Marc, and do your thing. Yay for Marc.
Hello. Yes, it's working. Great. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video from my Church of Reality evangelist, Michael Dowd, Reverend Reality. Michael Dowd is a true Christian evangelist. He went to college in Springfield, Missouri at Evangel College, pastored 3 churches, and eventually figured out that evolution was real, and he wrote a book called Thank God for Evolution. And then, as that evolved, he sort of figured out that he really needed to focus on reality itself. And like me, I'm totally non-religious, and he's totally religious, but we find ourselves coming to the same place because there's this greater reality that we're all part of, so we both realize it from different perspectives. The interesting thing about Michael, whose video I'm going to play in a few minutes, is that he has, this is a religious Christian slant on it. He talks about that the true understanding of God, the word God, really means reality. That only when, I know that I myself, I don't like, playing around with definitions and word salad unless it makes sense. And after he explained it, I realized that yes, what he says makes sense. That the humans evolved because, we had to continue to understand reality better and better. And in ancient times, they didn't have a word for reality, so they called it God, not even knowing what it is. But, a more accurate definition of the word God is reality. So Michael, comes from a Christian background and uses God language, but when he says the word God, as he explains in the video, he really means reality. So, the style of this is something that a lot of times it causes atheists to cringe. Someone like me, sometimes I cringe at some of this too. But when I realize that what he's saying is right, and that then I got to realize that there's something wrong with my perception if he's actually right. Just like there's other things where people reveal things about reality that I'm not entirely comfortable with, and I don't like. I don't like quantum mechanics. I don't like the non-deterministic universe we live in. I really don't like the speed of light limitation. That just, Einstein pisses me off. So taking that into consideration, an atheist audience often, has problems with his style, but when you listen to Michael's message, I'm gonna be building on that message, So I'm gonna play his video now, and you'll hear what inspirational reality sounds like. That reality actually is a religious choice, and that this is what inspirational reality is like. So I'm gonna see if I can start this thing here, and need sound. Let's see. It's probably. I might have to start this again. Just a minute here. So my end here. Fix this.
Confidently say that millions of us around the world, secular and religious alike, agree with. Now, these can be said in religious
Let me back this up here.
And so I'm trying to articulate what I call 6 main points of agreement that I think I can confidently say that millions of us around the world, secular and religious alike, agree with. Now, these can be said in religious terms, secular terms, or a combination of two. I'll first say it in using one term of each, a secular term and a religious term, and then I'll show you how you can do it otherwise. So reality, I'll first say it like a mantra or like a creed for me. This is my credo. Reality is my God. Evidence is my scripture. Big history is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. Integrity is my salvation. And ensuring a just and healthy future is my mission. Now to say the same thing in secular terms, reality is my ultimate concern. What I'm suggesting is that there's tens of millions of people that would align, they may have not heard this language exactly, but would align with this sentiment, that reality, as evidentially known and collectively discerned, it should be our ultimate commitment, our ultimate concern. Living in right relationship with reality. So reality is our ultimate concern, or religious reality is our God. Evidence is the primary way reality is revealing itself. And as Ken Wilber points out, there's not one form of evidence. Different disciplines have different criteria for what counts as evidence. And all that needs to be validated. But nonetheless, evidence, including the evidence of our subjective experience, but evidence is what is our best map of reality. It's our best understanding of what's real and what's important. Big history is our creation story, is that the creation story. See, all cultures have had to have a creation story. That helps you know who you're related to, where you came from, where things are going. It's a culture's sacred story. It's their cosmology or their creation myth. And we now have a creation myth that can unite all of humanity because it's the first and only globally produced and evidence-based creation story. There are Christian scientists, Buddhist scientists, atheist scientists, Hindu scientists, New Age scientists that are all contributing to big history. So it's the history of everyone and everything. It's what Brian Swim and Thomas Berry called the universe story, or what Edward O. Wilson called the epic of evolution. So so reality is our God, evidence is our scripture, big history is our creation story. And it also lets us know that we're related to everything. We're related to all forms of life. In fact, one of my favorite quotes, Marlon Lavenar is the pastor of the largest Unitarian church in the world, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, believe it or not. And he said, you know, we've all heard some fundamentalist-minded person say, don't tell me I'm related to monkeys. But now that we understand DNA and have cracked its code, we know that we're not just related to monkeys, we're related to zucchini, so let's get over it. You know? So reality is our God, evidence is our scripture, big history is our creation story. Ecology is our theology, that is the science of living in right relationship to nature. To reality. See, sometimes people will say, well, what do you mean by reality? You're saying reality is your God. What do you mean by reality? I like Philip K. Dick's definition. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. So what's fundamentally, undeniably, inescapably real, to live in right relationship to that, is what it's really all about. And again, that's internal and external and social. And so I think there are 3 things that we can confidently say are real, whether we believe in them or not. One is mystery. Not just the realm that we don't know, but the entire realm that we don't even know that we don't know. It doesn't matter whether you believe in mystery or not. Mystery is real. Time is real. Now, sometimes spiritual people sort of bristle at that, but the past is real. I mean, yes, the only place you can experience the past is in the present moment, of course. But nonetheless, 13.8 billion years of creativity made this moment possible. And if you think that's not real, you're deceived. And the future, if you act as if the future is not real, we will condemn the future if we act as if the future is not real. So time, yes, you can't sort of touch it, but nonetheless, time is mysterious, but it's also inescapably real whether we believe in it or not. And nature is real, whether we believe it or not. Again, our inner nature, our outer nature, our social nature, and our interpretive nature. And interpretation is important, because that's why having a meaningless interpretation is deadly. We know of no culture in the history of humanity that has survived for any length of time without an I-thou relationship to time and nature. Martin Buber, the famous Jewish theologian, wrote a book called I and Thou, and he said, if we treat any person or any aspect of nature as an it, to be used or exploited by us, rather than a thou, to be honored and to be related to in a respectful way, he said the divine is not present, God is not present. And he ultimately said that we will cause our own extinction if we continue to treat nature as an it. So this is a big deal. whether we relate to nature and life and time and mystery as an it. Most of us don't relate to mystery as an it, but we certainly often, our culture, Western society, industrial society, has related to nature as an it. So that's why we've relegated God to the heavens, and we thought of nature just as an it, and that is no longer sustainable. So reality is our God. Evidence is our scripture. Big history is our creation story. Ecology is our theology. Integrity is our salvation. What I mean is that integrity are the character traits and practices and habits of living in right relationship to reality. It's all the things that help us live in right relationship to our spouse and our children and our family members and our community and our bioregion, and that's what I mean by integrity. I don't mean just being honest. I mean it's the practices and exercises and habits that help us live in right relationship to reality. And that really is our salvation. Again, for Christians, they personify that as Jesus. And sure enough, your only hope of salvation is to make integrity your Lord. That is, prioritize integrity over, following your instincts for sex or for whatever. Again, my last TED Talk was all about why we struggle and why we're tempted and all that. It's got nothing to do with our great-great-great-great-grandmother eating an apple. It's got to do with our mismatched instincts. And then finally, so reality is our God, evidence is our scripture, big history is our creation story, ecology is our theology, integrity is our salvation, and ensuring a just and healthy future is our mission. And that's really the core of the message, the gospel, if you will, that I'm speaking this year on this climate march, is this understanding. It's mythic, I get that, it's not literal, but it's mythic, but that the past is rooting for us. That you've got millions of generations and millions of individuals that in your lineage, that are your ancestors, that if they hadn't struggled and suffered and just, you wouldn't even be alive today. And so the past is rooting for us. That's a mythic way of thinking that's inspiring. It can help us wake up to do what's right and to do something that's healthy. And also, the future is calling us to greatness. So the sense that the past is rooting for us and the future is calling us to greatness is a meme, it's an idea that can inspire all of us, because it doesn't matter what your religion, what your philosophy, what your metaphysics, it doesn't matter whether you're a supernaturalist or a naturalist, it doesn't matter, all that stuff, it's cool, and it can inspire us, but it doesn't matter how you think about the afterlife, or all of that, we can have all our differences, and that's cool, but if we all act as if the past is rooting for us, and the future is calling us to greatness, we will participate in what God's up to. That is what reality is doing, and we will basically be doing the work, to use my tradition, the work of the kingdom. That is the work of the divine unfolding in consciousness, in culture. Because the last thought I want to say is that we are the universe becoming conscious of itself. We are not separate from nature. So we've got this trajectory of billions of years of creativity, and we now are the universe, after some 13.8 billion years of creativity, now exploring its own nature. So that's who we are. We are the universe becoming aware of itself. And so that sense of identity with the process it awakens our sacred calling, so that to be of service to the future, there's no more holy task. Because good, bad, great, and evil have always been defined by how we impact others and how that ripples out to the future. If I'm a contribution to you or to the future, I've done a good thing. If I harm others or harm the future, I've done a bad thing. If I sacrifice in order to be a blessing to others of the future, I've done a great thing or a heroic thing. But if I'm an individual or corporation and I self-centeredly serve my own needs, screw others, to hell with the future, I've done an evil thing. This is not moral rocket science. We don't need 10 commandments to tell us this. And so for us to sacrifice, for us to lessen our impact on the planet, and to use our gifts and not worry about perfecting ourselves. So many people in the East are trying to just sort of witness all their troubling things, and they want to get perfect. And the people in the West are trying to study their Bible. Our flaws are necessary. The universe needs our flaws and insecurities and shortcomings. We don't have to get it all right in order to be a blessing to the future. So taking all that we are and all that we're not, and simply finding some way of being a blessing to the future.
Okay, so that there, what you've just seen is what a reality evangelist sounds like. And right now, Michael Dowd is like the only person on the planet, who really gets it at that level. He has a unique style that even in front of, whether it's in front of a religious audience or an atheist audience or a mixed audience, he has a message that everybody listens to. And he's very bright and inventive, and a lot of the things that I've added recently to the Church of Reality website actually come from ideas that he started. And one of the things that he talks about is in other videos, he's done a few TED Talks and a lot of other things. If you look him up on YouTube, there's a lot of Michael Dowd out there, is the idea that we're in a religious reformation, which he calls the evidential reformation, which is religion, what he calls religion 3.0. And religion 3.0 is understood as the original religion 1.0 was the authority of elders. Religion 2.0 is the authority of Scripture, because humans evolved, writing, and once we've evolved writing, then these ideas about, where we came from, the origin of the universe and stuff, the people imagined were true, got solidified in writing. So writing gave the advantage of being able to accurately convey ideas. It also had the disadvantage of freezing ideas in time, so that the Bible is now stuck, in a static state, and as every year becomes more and more obsolete. The religion 3.0 is the authority of evidence. And the authority of evidence is the authority that, what we actually can test, what we can actually deduce, is the correct interpretation of reality. Now, back in the old days, in ancient times, there wasn't a word for reality and there wasn't science. Reality and science are modern day concepts that didn't exist more than a few hundred years ago. Back in ancient times, the only thing people could do was look around them and try to make up a story that seemed to fit what they were observing. So the Bible was state-of-the-art, science at the time that the Bible was written. Back then, the concept of thou shalt not kill was a revolutionary idea, because early evolution was all about kill and eat. We went through 3.5 billion years of kill and eat, to get to where we have humans, and the concept of right and wrong and justice and things like that is a human modern day phenomenon that was created by evolution. It was created by our intelligence, and it was created by our network as a society. So this is still a work in progress, and even today in a lot of parts of the world, the idea of thou shalt not kill is an idea that they haven't really grasped, especially, in the Middle East in particular, where life, means virtually nothing, in a lot of cultures there. So you got to look at it as, that atheists tend to look at this and say, well, all religion is a scam. And that's not really an accurate definition. And that all Christians are evil or brainwashed or whatever. It's not that. It's just that they haven't updated. It's like, they're still running Windows 95. They at least have a computer, but it's obsolete. Or they haven't installed the updates on their phone. So this reality as a religion is the logical progression of where religion should go as religion evolves into the future. In other words, everybody has their own God, and as atheists don't believe in God, and they're the God of Abraham and Isaac, and that God doesn't exist. That God isn't real. That God was a personification of reality. So today, if you use the word God, what does the word God mean? Really, because, we should talk about that, Well, the only thing that God could actually mean that makes sense is if God is reality, because God, is the biggest thing out there. God, there can't be anything bigger than God. So if you have another God that's smaller than God, the God of the Bible, the God of the Quran, the various Hindu gods, those are little gods, because those are all, to the point that anything about it is true, they're all subsets of reality. So as long as you have a God that's different than reality, your God is smaller than my God, and if my God is bigger, my God wins. So the only type of God that could be real that makes sense is to say that reality, that God is a personification of reality. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that your God is real. I'm not saying God is real. I'm saying your God is really my reality, and if you're not worshiping my reality, you're worshiping the wrong God. And if you're an atheist and you're focused on their God and you're not focused on my God, which is reality, then you too are wrong. You're focused in the wrong place. So one of the things that we have to understand, and there's a lot of language going around that I'm going to use different definitions for a lot of things, and the reason I'm going to do that is not to play word salad with definitions, but to make the point that a lot of these definitions that people talk about are just plain wrong, and they lead you to wrong thinking. I'm talking about definitions used by religion and definitions used by atheists, both. And the first thing is that religion is not about God. Religion is not about your relationship with God. Religion is about your relationship to reality. Now, your religion may have a dysfunctional relationship with reality, but it's your relationship to reality because that's what's real. If I were to try to tell you to go somewhere, I says, well, you go south on El Camino and then you make a left down there where the old schoolhouse used to be, you're not going to know where to go. But if I tell you to go down there and make a left where the new fire station is, then you have something real to relate to. So religion is about your relationship to reality. So when atheists say all religion is wrong, they're wrong on that. Because one, religion, at least is an early attempt to understand reality, by primitive people who were doing the best they could at the time they had with it, to do it in. And the second thing is that, as we know, that more than one religion can't be right. Either all religions are wrong, or at best, one religion is right. Well, I'm here to say that there is one religion that's right, and only one religion that's right, and that's the religion that's based on the premise of the Church of Reality is believing in everything that's real. And by definition, believing in everything that's real has got to be the right answer because it's real. Now, we don't know what all is real, so it's really a commitment to putting reality first. So as long as we're committed to put reality first, that means that if I find out I'm wrong, I change my mind about it. So when I hear Michael Dowd as an evangelist tell me, yes, I believe in God, God is reality, and that's the right definition for it. And at first, I bristle, it's like, oh, you don't use the G word, it just makes me cringe, But then when I realize that, yes, that's actually true, what he's saying, then when I realize that what he's saying is true, I have to change my mind, because that actually is if there were such a thing as God, God would have to be reality. If you believe in any other God that's not reality, it's not God, because it's smaller, And all you have to do, the only thing you have to know about God is if God is the biggest thing in the universe, then my definition of reality is right. Now, the cool thing about my definition of God and reality is that when you hear a lot of this religious stuff, if you substitute reality for God, all of a sudden a lot of what they say makes sense. For instance, if I told you that if you don't know God, you shall surely die, well, what's that? That makes you bristle. But if I say to you, if you don't understand reality, you're going to go extinct because if we don't get off this planet, everything goes away and we're going to go extinct. It's like, oh, yeah, we're going to go extinct if we don't get off this planet, In order to get off this planet, we have to understand a lot more about reality than we do today. So if God and reality are the same thing, then if I say to you, we'll go extinct if we don't understand reality, and I say to you, we'll die if we don't understand God, I'm saying exactly the same thing. Those phrases mean the same thing in the context if you understand the true definition of God as the religious people use it is reality. Now, personally, I'm not really that comfortable with God language, and Michael Dowd is, and he talks, mostly to a religious audience, and that's where he comes from, and he's right, but I'm not somebody who likes to talk about God and say that God is real, except in the context of, defining what the real God is and making the argument to the religious people who are watching this audio, this video on YouTube, which will be up there in 2 weeks, that you're worshiping the wrong God if you're not, updating. If you don't, come up to the evidential reformation and understand that the true God is reality, and we understand reality through evidence, through science, one could say that science is how we worship God. And that would be an accurate statement, for the religious world. So if you're against science, you're against God. If you're against evolution, you're against God, because evolution is how God created us. Now, in the atheist world, these first of all, not everybody's alike, us just in the atheist world, we tend to be more science-oriented, and the religious world tends to be more emotionally oriented, So Michael Dowd's message and his training and his whole culture, his whole being, is about that world, which represents more people than what we have, because science is new. And those people are trying to do the right thing. They want to live their life. They want to be good people. They want to be good members of society. They want the future to be better than what they have. They want their children to have a better life than they had, just like we in the atheist world, the humanist world, want our children to have a better life than what we had. So we all want the same thing. But the thing is we need to figure out, well, what's the best roadmap, the best way of getting there? And, our relationship to reality, as it really is really our best way to get there, because if we don't have the right relationship to reality, then we go extinct. If we dump, too much carbon into the atmosphere and we heat the planet up and we boil off the oceans, which isn't really going to happen. We're actually going to just get hot and be uncomfortable and have to move cities on the coastline, in a few miles maybe. But if we do that, if we make the wrong decisions, then we pay the consequences of that. So, the penalty for bad decisions is inconvenience or death, So in our tradition, ignorance is sin, essentially, that, if we decide that we're going to embrace being stupid and we're going to embrace ignoring reality, then we're going to pay the consequences of that. But sometimes in the religious world, the idea of personification is actually a useful way of describing things, because we have a meat brain, and our meat brain is actually a very advanced computer, which actually lacks a lot of the common stuff that, ordinary machine-based computers, have. For instance, how many people, can multiply two 10-digit numbers in their head, Not very many, where, that's nothing for a computer. You talk about, well, the meat computer in a head, how many teraflops does it run? 0. We can't do any floating point operations in 1 second. So, but in this meat computer that was created by evolution, we tend to personify things. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to personify evolution, and I'm going to call evolution Darwin. And so Darwin is the personification of evolution. And the question is what does Darwin want us to do? Well, since we are here because of evolution, the people we are in this room, the life on this planet, are the result of those things that did what it takes to survive. So all our ancestors did the right thing. So since Darwin kills what doesn't survive or makes the mistakes and goes extinct, Darwin wants us to understand reality. And it's actually, when you think about it, it's like this totally makes sense, because if we don't understand reality, we go extinct and we're replaced by something else that understands reality. In other words, if there's another planet out there that has life on it that's similar to life here at the same level of advancement, if they don't understand reality, then Darwin is going to make them go extinct too. So when we look at history, we look at, 65 million years ago, that a big asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs, then that's Darwin's message. What's Darwin trying to tell us? Darwin is saying to us, we better spend a little bit more money on that space program. Otherwise, we're going to suffer the same fate as the dinosaurs, because eventually the big asteroid's going to come, and if we can't push the big asteroid out of the way, we're gone. So same thing with getting off the planet. In 500 million years, the sun is going to be, the sun keeps getting hotter every year, and in 500 million years, the sun's going to be hot enough that it's going to boil off the oceans, and eventually it's going to expand to where, the Earth is going to end up in the center of the sun. So if we don't get off this planet, all life on this Earth is gone. The only chance we have to survive is to get off this planet, and the only way we're going to get off this planet is to live in right relationship with reality, to understand reality, or in the religious terms, worship God, to understand our Creator, so that we can move out into space, other planets, and whatever we have to do in order to survive long term. Now, this isn't something that we have to do this year, but it's something we need to be thinking about, because we got a global warming situation happening. We have a genetic engineering to where we're going to be able to determine what it is we're going to evolve into. And we have the big questions in front of us, about why should humans even live? Why are we justified in being here? So, somebody in this group asked me one time, wouldn't the world be better off if humans didn't exist? And the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because if humans didn't exist, all life on this planet is doomed. Humans are the only chance that life on this planet has of getting off this planet in time before the sun expands and wipes out all life. So all life up until this point has evolved to create us so that we can get off this planet and continue. If evolution had happened 10% slower on this planet than it did, we wouldn't be here, and this planet would turn into a dead planet. So what we have to do as a society is make the choice: are we going to live or are we going to die? And if we're going to choose life, if we're going to choose to exist, if we're going to choose to evolve and become better and understand the universe, then we have to do the hard work. We have to have the right relationship with reality. Otherwise, we're condemned, to non-existence. In fact, since we end up in the center of the sun, one could compare that to the Christians' version of hell. Except that our hell is hotter than their hell, because our hell is 100 million degrees, and we fuse brimstone into iron, in our hell. On the other hand, if you want eternal life, religion promises you the possibility of living forever. We can do that if we have the right technology, because, we can do things that they used to call miracles. So 20, 30 years from now, they may be able to scan your brain and upload your consciousness to the cloud where you lived it forever, Think about it. You die, you're uploaded to the cloud where you live forever. What does that sound like? It sounds like their heaven, except that our heaven is plausible. And if we put our resources into science, we can make that happen. Everybody talks about global warming. Oh, global warming is a big catastrophe. It's going to wipe us out, Well, global warming probably isn't going to wipe us out, but it's going to make things damn inconvenient for us. But we can do something about global warming, quite frankly. If we developed a battery that was 10 times better than the lithium-ion batteries we have today, global warming goes away. Because energy storage is the only thing that stops us from getting off gasoline and oil and coal. If we can store energy efficiently and cheaply, we can get rid of those things and go 100% solar. There's plenty of solar out there. The only thing is that the sun doesn't shine at night, and we have to be able to store it. Everybody would have an electric car if you could drive 1,000 miles on a charge. We would have electric jets, airplanes that could fly faster and further than kerosene-powered jets today, because an electric jet can fly at a higher altitude than a carbon-based fuel jet, because it doesn't depend on oxygen to burn fuel. So we wouldn't be limited, to 40,000 feet. We could go up at 60,000 feet, and go many times faster than the speed of sound up there where the air is really, really thin and there's very little friction. There's all kinds of things that we could do if we prioritize our resources and put our resources into science rather than stupid stuff. If we took the money that the Republicans wasted on a political stunt in shutting down the government, which was $25 billion, and gave that money to Elon Musk to develop battery and supercapacitor technology, global warming would go away. So the reason that we have to have religion, a reality-based religion, is because we have to answer the questions that need to be answered. So atheism is a problem because atheism uses the wrong language. Atheism is about God. It's not only not about God, but it's about the wrong God. So nobody cares what you don't believe in. Religious people do not care what you don't believe in. The right solution is to substitute religion with the right kind of religion, which is a reality-based religion that answers the big questions of who we are, where we came from, where we're going, and why we should do what we need to do. So, Christianity is wrong. Atheism is actually more wrong than Christianity, because if I were a teacher and I had an atheist student and a Christian student, and I said, where does morality come from? And the Christian student gave me an answer of the Bible, and their answer is wrong, and the atheist student left it blank, the Christian student would get a higher score because they at least tried to answer the question, and even though they got some things wrong, they're at least trying to get the answer right. Atheism, which is against all religion, and atheists tend to bristle at the word religion, is even more wrong because their back is turned toward reality too, because atheists need reality, because without reality, there wouldn't be any place for God not to be real in. So we need to change the language to take God out of the center of the religious discussion and understand that religion is not about God. Religion is about your relationship to reality. And if there is a one true religion and you don't believe in any religion, you're just as wrong as the religion that believes in the wrong religion. And the thing about it is, just like other religions, is if you don't believe in my religion, my reality-based religion, if you turn your back on reality, you die. You go extinct. We only have one path. Just like, these other things. They say, well, there's only one path, Where they're right about there's only one path, it's just that they have the wrong path. My path is the right path because my path is reality itself. And people, are in religions because they seek the truth. Well, what is the truth? Well, there is no higher truth than reality. If you believe in something other than reality, then what you believe isn't true. So if you're in the religious audience and you're listening to this, and you have to ask yourself the question, do I want to end up on my deathbed looking back at my life and saying that my life was for nothing, that I lived my entire life with my back turned to reality? Because what are they going to say on your Facebook page 1,000 years from now? Because that's the afterlife now. It used to be a tombstone, But now it's whether or not people are still posting to your Facebook page after you die, So and the same thing with atheism is that if you spend all your time, because a lot of atheists are people who had a bad experience with religion, and it's a lot like stalking your ex-wife. They're pissed off. They want to hurt these people, but they're so scared of anything that says anything like about religion, is that if you say the G word, or the C word, church, their brains turn off instantly and they don't hear anything beyond that. Sam Harris has got that problem because he wrote a book that you have no free will, and Sam Harris is just plain dead wrong about that. He's absolutely dead wrong. He thinks it's a deterministic universe. Science has proved that it's a non-deterministic universe, but even whether it's deterministic or not deterministic, Sam Harris, thinks, wrote an entire book that you have no free will. I'm actually a connoisseur of the free will. And one of the differences between me and Sam Harris is when he does a speech, he reads from notes, which would make him tend to believe in a deterministic universe. I don't use notes, so anything that I say you know, who knows where it's going to go? You know, I'm kind of making this up on the fly. And actually free will, first of all, nobody really understands what free will is because we don't have the technology yet to understand what free will is. But free will is actually a software phenomenon, and that maybe in 20 years as software continues to develop and we develop artificial intelligence, then we'll understand what free will is. But until then, it's kind of one of those things like free will is kind of like porn, you know it when you see it. And the reason I think I have free will is because if I didn't have free will, would I be talking about things like how to think outside the box? Would I be worried about whether or not I have free will if I was in a deterministic universe? I don't think so. I think the kind of language we use, you know, when we talk about free will and we think about our free will is, you know, essentially recursive enough, you know, that there's a phenomenon going out there that the thing that makes me and my identity is an act of, you know, free will and consciousness. And I think that, you know, but my point with Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Hitchens, not so much Michael or Daniel Dennett, you know, he sort of gets it, you know, but these people are so scared of religion that anything you say that's good about religion is going to, you know, just, you know, bother the hell out of them, you know, and because of that, they're actually keeping atheists away from reality. They're taking up, you know, too much mental space, you know, focused on what isn't real, and they're a distraction from what is real. So I'm saying that there is a real religion out there, there's one true religion, and that we better get on board with it. And whether you're an atheist or a theist, there's you know, the religion 3.0 is the upgrade path from atheism, and it's the upgrade path from all religions, because it's the evidential reformation, and that we should, you know, be embracing it. So I'm running low on time here, so I was going to leave 25 minutes for discussion. I'm down to 20, so I'm going to cut it off here, and we're going to start the discussion. I'm sure that you probably have a lot of questions because I said a lot of controversial things.
Okay, so people have been talking to me even before we got to this point. They have questions. So if we don't get to your question, go sit with Mark at the speaker table. What I am going to try and do is I'm going to do my best at first giving the mic to people who I think have not asked a question in a long time. Please keep your questions short. Let's keep the shorter we can keep the questions and answers, the more ideas we can get out, if that's what people are up for. So we have 20 minutes.
Mark, I have looked forward to this talk for so long, and I want to say actually 3 points. And I'm surprised to find where I'm standing here right now, because I think, first of all, you underestimate atheists. They are a little different. Your list doesn't have a single thing on there that I don't believe in. And I just want to say that I was worried about that our brain might be limited. Upgrading, I like your idea.
Yeah.
Space travel, I thought it was cowardly to leave this planet until we knew how to fix it. That's another arc, taking the web of life with us. And you're right, sooner or later, we are going to have to leave. And the other thing I believe in is lifelong learning, and that's upgrading too.
Yes.
So I think you made me a convert, sir.
Well, that's good. And the thing about, you know, moving out into space and making decisions like that and genetic engineering and these stuff is that we need to figure out an objective way to determine what is the right thing to do. You know, are we going to evolve into machines? There's a lot of science fiction, you know, where that doesn't work out so well, you know, and one of these days the machines may, you know, ask us, why are you still here? And we should think about that before the machines get to that point. And in 10 years, the average desktop computer is going to be smarter than the average person. In 30 years after that, 32 years after that, the average computer is going to be smarter than the sum total of all humans on the planet. So we need to figure out, you know, how we're going to, you know, expand into the future, and we need principles that we can go by to answer those big questions, and those are religious questions, and we need to answer those religious questions.
By the way, I spoke to Sam Harris before this talk, and he told me that you were going to tell us all he was dead wrong. So, anyway, sorry, I'm joking. So I like 95% of what you're saying. I love it all, except for one concern, one question. The concern is that guy said, we are the universe becoming self-aware of itself. That is, we self-aware consciousness, or the universe becoming self-aware consciousness. Well, if you look at the term universe in that statement, I would argue that the concept of the universe being one thing only exists within self-aware consciousness. So, don't know if you can follow me while I'm talking here, but so, you know, one could equally say a flower is the universe becoming a flower itself. The moon is the universe becoming a moon of itself. A gold atom is the universe becoming a gold atom of itself. You see my point? There's billions of different forms in the universe. We, self-aware consciousness, is one of them. It seems a little bit self-serving, self-interested to give us so much more meaning in the universe than the other billion forms that are out there. Otherwise, I like it all, but I just tend to see the universe as one thing becoming conscious as a little bit self-serving of us. As I agree, it's in our interest as self-aware consciousness to believe it's somewhat unique, but, well, there's a lot of other unique things out there.
Okay, well, what's unique about humans is that we can actually measure the age of the universe at 13.82 billion years. We can leave the planet and go up into space. We can measure the speed of light. So we have developed an intelligence, at a level to understand the universe that a cat, a dog, a flower, and nothing else on this planet has ever done before. So our awareness of the universe is far, far, far greater than anything on this planet. And depending on what's on other planets, there's a possibility that we may be the only spot in the universe, we're the only spot that we know of, where the universe is aware of itself through us. And it's not even individually through us, but it's us collectively. Humanity collectively understands an awareness of the universe, that the Hubble telescope is our common eye that looks back at the beginning of time. And I think that that's valuable. We're just at the beginning. We're like a newborn baby that just found its toes, and that we should at least, when it comes to meaning of life questions, we should at least continue to exist and evolve long enough to answer the question of why are we here? Do we have a purpose in life? And I think that evolution created us, and we're on a trajectory, and we should stay the course. Next.
If you would like to read an article that's the same as this forum, it's on Wikipedia under the word apiothus. Question: what can we do to make people actually be interested in the survival of the human race? As far as I see, people care about their children. They care less about their grandchildren. And many generations later, everybody has regressed to the norm. So what can you do to get people to actually live like they care about future generations?
Well, that's an interesting question that I would like to have the answer to, and somehow I feel like, maybe that this idea of reality-based religion will catch on, and I think people don't appreciate existence, that we are so lucky to even be here. When you look out at the universe, as an extremely violent place, and that I think that life in the universe is much more rare than, people would like to admit, because the things that happen on this planet that allows us to be here, was just so extraordinarily lucky that if we had some type of an appreciation for, who we are and how we got here, if we could even see what life was like, if we could go back in time and see what life was like 300 years ago, the people would be shocked, to see the difference, and one of the problems is that our lifespan is so short that we don't have the perception of deep time, the way we would now. Now, in 100 years from now, we're going to have a bigger perception of deep time because we have the ability to record time on video so people can see what happened, years ago, back to when video started. And as we go forward, we're going to have a bigger deep time perspective. But I think that people don't understand appreciate how lucky we are to be here, and that they think that things just go on naturally when we're just plain lucky, and that we should take that seriously. We should take our existence seriously. We should have appreciation for who we are and how we got here and where we're going. Next.
It would seem that religions have always attributed their teachings to their version of reality. Someone lived because they were just in the eyes of God. Somebody died because it was God's will. In other words, there was a reality definition there too. And my concern is that with a church of reality, in many ways we fall back into a religion 1.0 paradigm in which we're looking to elders to tell us what reality is. I have a serious question about how much we really can know and represent to those around us as hard fact. And perhaps it's more important that we be able to tell those around us that we don't know.
I agree. That's a good question. What's different about the Church of Reality than all other religions is that the Church of Reality is not a fixed religion. The Church of Reality is an evolving religion. So the Church of Reality is a religion 3.0 type religion. It's an evidence-based religion, and whatever evidence reveals to us, we change our mind when we figure out we're wrong. Just 10 years ago, we thought maybe the universe was going to expand and then it was going to collapse, and that the rate of expansion of the universe would slow down over time. And they did measurements and found out that the universe's expansion is actually accelerating. So what we used to believe 10 years from now, we no longer believe, and that's because of evidence. So the Church of Reality will never suffer the same fate as other religions for two reasons. One is it's evidence-based, and two is that it's based on reality itself. So it's not just a story that if somebody changes the story, it's just like other stories. There's a difference between the Church of Reality in that there actually is physical reality out there that we all experience. So the speed of light will always be the speed of light, no matter, you know.
Can we know reality?
Can we what?
Can we know it?
Yeah, we know things through evidence. And then if we find new evidence that we're wrong, we change our mind. So we'll never get there. The Church of Reality isn't a destination, it's a path. You know, it's a path forward, and it will always be a path forward. We will never arrive there. We will always either be on the right path or not the right path, and we can tell that by whether or not, you know, we're on, you know, our understanding of reality is the same as what reality actually is. Next.
You seem to be assuming that our minds are capable of grasping all of reality. I'm afraid that's not true. We all live in fantasy worlds that evolved long ago by our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and it's still with us. We have started changing our attitude about 10,000 years ago when agriculture and animal husbandry was invented. That improved things. But it's going to take hundreds of thousands of years to get our heads straight, and I don't think we're going to make it. We do have to deal with reality to some extent, or we wouldn't survive. But most of our lives are lived in this fantasy world, well, worlds, I should say. Men's and women's brains, for example, are wired differently. And if you look at those differences, they are adaptations to our roles as hunter-gatherers. And our bodies were also adapted to that environment. And evolution will eventually straighten us out if we survive long enough. But I don't think we're prepared to deal with reality fully, and neither will our descendants for a long time.
Well, I think that we need to get there, because if we don't get there, we're not going to be around here very long. But the thing is that humans are evolving faster than anything has ever evolved in the history of the planet. And the reason is that we are evolving through information, and we're evolving through technology, and our information and our technology is part of who we are. So that even though biologically we're still, you know, individual meat brains, what we've managed to do through the evolution of language is we've managed to create a neural network, you know, for which we can all work or bring our intelligence into a common mind, for which we understand the universe collectively. And with the internet and our technology and computers, we have offloaded some of those functions to enhance our brains through the technology that expands our common mind, so that we can do things that brains can't do. We can see things that eyes can't see. And that all becomes part of, looking at humanity as a single individual who is doing things like, humanity is moving out into space, not individuals, except for maybe Elon Musk, he's somebody who, I want to go to Mars, so nobody's going to take me there. I'll build my own rockets, but even him has, people working for him and working with him to make that happen. And in my opinion, Elon Musk is a saint, he's a prophet, So if there's anybody who, a realist should emulate, as a role model, Elon Musk, I can't get enough of Elon Musk, So, but I think I'm optimistic. I think we're going to make it. I think that a lot of our problems that we have today are the good kind of problems. Overpopulation is a good kind of problem to have, as opposed to extinction. So a lot of the problems we have today are problems that were created by our success. Anytime we're successful, we're going to create new problems, and that's just the way evolution is. So, I'm glad we have good problems, and I'm optimistic.
Next. I would agree with you, Mark. Our species has been too successful, perhaps, at overpopulating and over-extracting and polluting the planet. I compliment you for your insights, sir, and real wisdom. And I think the Church of Reality should declare Marc Perkel as its first saint. Okay?
Well, I'm more the Jesus of the Church of Reality. Or the Elon, or L. Ron Hubbard of the Church of Reality.
Right. Okay. No, I think you're far more benign than L. Ron Hubbard, sir. Interestingly enough, the Humanist Community's statement of values and purposes on the flyer today, I note, indicates that the Humanist Community seeks to use science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. And Mark, you certainly have suggested that be perhaps our new direction for the species. I'm not as optimistic as you are. I think the odds are 50-50 that we're going to have the IQ evolution. We're going to have a constant ethics, because I haven't heard you mention the ethical requirements that we individually and collectively decide that we value the future, sir. I compliment you for where we may get. Again, given the tools we now have, the science level we have, and the prospects of utilizing your game plan and architecture, but how will we go about overcoming the stupidity and the preposterousness that dominates both the religious fundamentalists in our culture and world civilizations today, and the extraordinary levels of greed and corruption that dominate our economic resources, in order for us to approach implementation of what you propose? Although I do endorse it highly, and I compliment you for it.
That's a good question, and I think that some of the ethical things, that's what Michael Dowd covered in that little piece, that that anything that's is a blessing to the future if you're doing something that helps the future, and wrong is doing things that hurt the future in society. So we can derive mathematically ethics from reality. We can hear what Darwin is trying to tell us. What does Darwin want us to do? And when you look at it in the terms of what does Darwin want us to do, it makes it easier to think that through. But as far as how do we change the world, well, let's evangelize reality. Let's say that, we have the real God. God exists, and God is reality. And if you don't believe in our God, you're believing in the wrong God. And let the other religions make an argument against reality. That would be an interesting conversation to have. Because it would be easy to win that argument just on its face. So I call on all of the other religions to, embrace the one true God. The one true God being reality, and to, get on board. And I think that there's a way to do this, because, religious people want to do the right thing. They just, but most people are not science people like, a lot of the people in this room are. And they don't want to figure this out. They just want somebody who says, tell me what the right thing to do is and I'll do the right thing. And atheism doesn't put anything on the table. So I think that a Church of Reality concept puts something on the table where we could go to these people and say, most of the stuff you're doing is the right thing because evolution created these religions. And evolution got a lot of things right. There's more things right in Christianity than there is wrong, the wrong stuff kind of sticks out more, and if you're an atheist, it, gets under your skin. But, these are good people, and they want to do the right thing. And, well, what is the right thing? Well, we need to come up with an alternative religion that's better than their religion and create an upgrade path so that they are doing the right thing. And that's where Michael Dowd came up with this Religion 3.0 as the evidential reformation, because the thing is that when my God speaks to people, my God says the same thing to everybody. And that's how I know that my God is the real God, because it's consistent. My God is the real God because we can do miracles. We can take the heart out of one person and put it in another person. We can develop the technology to live forever. We can fly into the sky in a flaming chariot. It's called a rocket. It's called an airplane. You go to SFO and get on an airplane, and you're so high you're looking down at the heavens. We can do the miracles that they talk about in the Bible today, and the reason we can do it is because of our relationship with reality, our relationship to the true God, the God that actually is here today, still speaking to us, not the one that's absent, who hasn't been seen in 2,000 years. So I challenge the religious world to embrace the real God, and I'll tell the religious world is, if I'm wrong, I'll change my mind, as long as you will change your mind if you're wrong. And I say to the atheist world the same thing, that believing in something is better than believing in nothing, and that you need to get your heads out of the Bible and quit and embrace something. And if possible, I don't know what the dinner thing is, but I'd like to run a little longer because there are a lot of people with questions here. And go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. I agree with many things you're saying, but I disagree that atheism in any way is worse than Christianity. However, I agree that atheists should stop focusing on what they don't believe and start focusing on something that they can say they do believe. And I've seen the San Jose atheists actually participating in things like they're going to the kitchens, the help kitchens, they're donating time, and they're giving food to the homeless and doing good things like that you would see, Christians do. And another thing is, let's see, what were the 6 principles of the Church of Reality again?
Okay, those are Michael Dowd's. Reality is, I'll try to see if I can do it from memory. Reality is my God, evidence is my scripture, big history is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. Integrity is my salvation, and having a just and healthy future is my mission.
Okay,
so
thank you much.
And that works, and that's something I think that everybody can agree on. I agree with Michael Dowd on that. Next.
I'm having a hard time knowing exactly how to say what I want to say. But I'll start with just saying that I do agree with most of what you're saying. What keeps coming to mind is that every religion says theirs is right and everyone else is wrong, or most do.
Right.
And I'm hearing that from you, and I'm wondering if that's part of the overall Church of Reality platform, or if that's the way that you present it. And also wondering whether there's maybe a more positive way to have people follow, as opposed to kind of creating that division.
Right. Well, first of all, there's no followers, there's just explorers. So, yes, the Church of Reality is right and everybody else is wrong. We do have that in common with everybody else. the difference between it, where I back this up, is that the Church of Reality is based on the pursuit of reality as it actually is. If we don't do that, then we're just as wrong as everybody else. But there is a reality out there, and there is one true religion. And if we don't live in right relationship to reality, then, the angry hand of Darwin will slap us down like he did the dinosaurs. So I know that this sounds very familiar, but the thing is, it's different about the Church of Reality than all other churches, is that I didn't, even though I came up with the name Church of Reality, I didn't invent this. The Church of Reality is something that actually exists in reality. So I came up with this thing. Michael Dowd, found it on his own and came to the same conclusions. People around the world who are not communicating with each other are all hearing the word of God, hearing the word of the true God, which is reality, and they're coming up with the same thing. So if I didn't think of this, somebody else would have thought of it the same way that, Leibniz and Newton both came up with calculus at the same time, independently of each other. So this is something that exists in the universe and even exists on other planets. If there was another planet like this, they would be facing the same questions and have the same answers as we do, is that you have to embrace reality. So the reality of it is, and sometimes there's things about reality that I don't like too, because, I agree that this does sound like, other religions. But, there is the one true religion, and believing in reality is it. And anything that doesn't believe in reality is believing in the wrong thing. It's just that simple. So unfortunately, we're like them, except I make the argument, and independently testable. If you got something that's better than reality, I'll join your religion. But, it's got to be better than reality, and I don't see how that happens.